On May 24, 2022, at 6:30 a.m. UK time, the Elizabeth Line, formerly known, and still in our hearts known, as Crossrail, opened, and I was there to see it firsthand. This video will show you the Elizabeth Line, and explain in short what it is. This is definitely the channel's biggest video yet, and the furthest from home I've made a video. So if you enjoy it, please consider supporting the channel on Patreon, subscribing to my Substack, which you can do for free, or becoming a member of the channel here on YouTube. And a huge shout out to all my existing supporters for making this trip possible. On the day of the opening, we arrived at Paddington for the first train at around 6:30 a.m., and we were not the only ones. We actually spent quite a bit of time waiting for the services to start at Paddington, so while we wait, we should probably take a quick look into everything you need to know about the line. Construction on the project, then known as Crossrail, started in 2009, with an original planned opening of 2018. Of course, the project has a much longer history, but I'll leave that for another video. To understand why the Elizabeth Line is huge, you need to understand that in many ways, it's just like a modern version of the Paris RER. Existing railways to the west, east, and southeast of London are being linked together with a new set of centre city tunnels that will carry enormously long mainline-style trains. The line's western extents travel to Reading and Heathrow, and services continue to just west of Paddington where the new tunnel begins. From here, there's a new underground station facility at Paddington, and then a number of stations widely spaced across the city centre, passing Liverpool Street and Whitechapel. After Whitechapel, the line features a massive underground grade-separated junction near Stepney Green, where the line splits in two. One branch heads to Canary Wharf, the Docklands, and Woolwich, popping up onto the surface a few times and ending up on the surface at Abbey Wood, while another carries on to Stratford and then all the way out to Shenfield on the existing railway. The eventual goal in proper RER fashion is to have through running of services, but the decision to use a metro-style signaling system in the core instead of something more flexible has made integrating the three sections, the core being the final one, difficult. So as of now, services are essentially running like an isolated metro service from Abbey Wood to Paddington, not heading out onto the main national rail tracks, while the western and eastern legs continue to operate separately as they've been for some time, meaning transfers are required to go between the sections, and they aren't even particularly short transfers. That said, as of now, you can enjoy the full line, just not on a single journey. Now, given the line isn't in its final state quite yet, frequencies are operating at a reduced level, with 12 trains per hour or a 5-minute bidirectional frequency through the central section, less than the ultimate 24 the system is designed for. What makes the line especially cool is that it uses the standard TfL fare zones. So, for a lot of longer trips, the Elizabeth Line is going to be way faster than the Tube, for example, for the same price. Interestingly, MTR will be running the line, just like with Sydney Metro and the MTR. Now, given this is RM Transit, you're probably curious about the rolling stock, which currently consists mostly of roughly 200-meter long 9-car train sets from Bombardier, which are fully walk-through, have a much higher than typical Metro top speed of around 140 km per hour, and run on 25 kV AC overhead power. Stations are also future-proofed for JR East scale 11-car trains roughly 250 meters long. I guess what makes this project most notable to the average viewer is just the incredible scale. The central section consists of 7 massive new underground stations and 2 new surface facilities, though most are quote-unquote simple add-ons deep under existing rail hubs. Thanks to the depth of the stations, facilities in many cases stretch to nearly half a kilometer long, and the massive scale of the underground works are really only something that exists in a few cities in the world. Though, unlike the few comparable systems out there, Crossrail actually features platform screen doors at all of the new underground stations, and full accessibility with level boarding at all new stations. Now, back to the current day at Paddington. Our plan was to ride the entire core as well as the unopened section to the southeast, which for all intents and purposes is fully isolated from the eastern and western branches and is thus part of the core, at least as I'll describe it today. After this, we'd ride back through, stopping to appreciate the various stations, a route that we might have planned down to the very meter in the week leading up to this video. Seriously, this was a lot of work, so if you're enjoying, please don't forget to like and share the video. The first thing you'd notice on the first day riding from Paddington is that you don't actually stop at Bond Street, which is the first station to the east and which unfortunately has been dealing with some major construction delays. The good news is that it'll likely open in a few months' time. Its design also isn't too unique, at least at platform level. I've got to say the trains themselves are really nice. We arrived a day early and checked out TfL Rail as the outer branches were known until, well, today, to get a sense of what the far west and far eastern branches were like. Nicely enhanced stations with lots of roundels and weather protection, though they don't have proper level boarding. Heading on board, the trains are fully walk-through, with a somewhat unique gangway compared to what I've seen before, with 3 doors per side per car, as well as a blend of seating options and of course lots of wayfinding. The trains also just feel pretty well built, and, well, expensive. Oh, and did I mention, these trains are enormous. We started off with a quick walk around Abbey Wood. This station, which is really nice, is honestly not anything too crazy, being a surface station where you can go up and down to the other platform to catch National Rail trains. That said, it is architecturally beautiful and would best basically anything in North America. Heading west just one stop, we get to Woolwich, which is our first underground station, and roughly 3.5 kilometers down the line. This facility feels super open, and also has a nice blend of lovely repeating light fixtures, dark finishes, exposed concrete, giant pillars, benches, and roundels. The station also feels modest, if I may say so. The underground box is really big, don't get me wrong, but there's a single low-key entrance pavilion, as low-key as an Apple Store-esque glass and stone box can be. Looking out front, you have a really nice pedestrian plaza opening onto a nice green space. You can also see the massive above-station transit-oriented developments, which are fairly common across the line. This station is actually brand new, but Woolwich Arsenal is just down the road, serving the DLR and National Rail services. Stepping back in, perhaps the last thing worth noting, besides the exceptionally nicely finished station interior, is that this station doesn't actually feel too deep, and you can get to the platforms on just a single escalator ride. After leaving Woolwich, the line crosses the Thames and pops up to somewhat uniquely run between two roads before diving back underground and running under the docks that help give the Docklands its name, and then popping back up to run next to the DLR branch to Beckton and Victoria Dock Road before stopping at Custom House Station, another more basic, for the Elizabeth Line station that serves the major Excel Convention Center roughly 4 kilometers down the line from Woolwich. The station has an overhead concourse that allows for people to cross over the roadway and the rail corridors, as well as drop down onto the DLR platforms for transfers. I must say, although the system is really nice, I'm not sure why, unlike say on Sydney Metro, platform gates weren't used on the new surface stations. Perhaps it's due to the London weather. Leaving Custom House, we once again enter a tunnel just west of here to head to Canary Wharf, which we arrive at next 3 kilometers away. You can connect to other services here, but as is the pattern with Canary Wharf Station on the tube, it requires a decent walk. West India Quay DLR is actually closer to Canary Wharf DLR, just as Heron Quays is closer to the Jubilee Line station at Canary Wharf. Awkward. The station itself at Canary Wharf is really impressive, and requires a short explainer. This station was created in the water of the dock here, and this giant building is the station, but also an overstation mall and park on the top level. The station was created by building cofferdams, draining part of the dock, then excavating into the soil and building the structure up, waterproofing it, and then eventually allowing the water back in, which I find really cool. As it were, you don't realize it sitting at platform level, but you are below the waterline and the floor of the dock. The platform level here is very sharp and shiny, with lots of metal accents and a yellow accent color because canaries on the escalators, as well as the usual roundels and benches, with lighting primarily coming from the lights integrated into the platform screen doors. About the doors, they're really nice and they run all the way to the ceiling. Digital ads are displayed between the doors, and useful wayfinding info above them shows where the next train is headed with a line diagram as well as departure times. From Canary Wharf, we continue underground to Whitechapel, which is the first proper core station that will see full service to both eastern branches and western branches, and it's about another 3.5 kilometers away from Canary Wharf. Transfers here are available to the Overground's East London line running north-south, as well as the Tube's Hammersmith and City and District lines running east-west. As you can see with Whitechapel, the station has what I would call the iconic white tube-shaped platforms and passages of the Elizabeth Line core, which makes stations that were sequentially mined out under very dense parts of London visually distinctive from those where an open construction process was possible, such as at Canary Wharf, Paddington, and Woolwich, which all have a distinctly different open look. Of course, you also have the large platform screen doors and related components filling out the space. If you're wondering about the dotted pattern on the white panels, that's meant to reduce sound. Now up above, there's a large overhead canopy bridge connection which runs directly over the East London line and connects to an old station entrance on Whitechapel Road, while also providing overhead connections to the tube. From Whitechapel, the tunnels continue to Liverpool Street 1.5 kilometers away, which as you can see has the mined form and the other things you'd come to expect from an underground station. Since Liverpool Street is a serious mainline rail terminus, numerous transfers are available here, including to overground services running to the north, the Hammersmith and City, Metropolitan and Circle lines running east-west, and the Central line running north-south. The western end of the platforms actually connect directly to Moorgate Station, which allows for transfers to the Northern line running north-south, as well as to the subsurface lines, meaning it will now be possible to ride the trains to the other side of the same station complex. Oh, and this is also where you'll have to transfer onto Elizabeth Line services out east to Stratford and Shenfield, at least for now. I will say that unlike some of the stations we've seen so far, Liverpool Street does feel more constrained, and that's simply because of how tightly it needs to fit underground between all the stuff that's already here, though it certainly isn't lacking in white paneling all over the place. Outside of the station, the Western Liz Line entrance at Moorgate is part of a larger TOD with a gate line right as you enter, as with Woolwich, whereas the Eastern Liz Line entrance is a simpler glass box design. Note, these entrances are in addition to the existing ones. Another neat feature here is that the space for the escalators does double duty by providing space for an incline elevator as well. Very cool. Now, we still have several more core stations to check out, so onwards another 1.5 kilometers to Farringdon. Similar to Liverpool Street, there are east-west connections to the Circle, Hammersmith and City, and Metropolitan lines here, and Farringdon Elizabeth Line station also connects to tube stations, in this case Farringdon and Barbican. But this is quite a bit less notable since both serve the same subsurface routes. That said, Farringdon also plays host to Thameslink services travelling north-south, connecting London's two primary cross-city mainline railways. Looking at the station, things feel quite distinct, with two dedicated entranceways to the east and west connecting to Barbican and Farringdon respectively. It would have been nice to rename the connecting stations to note their connectivity, as with Châtelet-Les Halles in Paris. Heading up to the eastern entrance of the station, we can note yet another surface-level gate line, with a very boxy ceiling that feels distinct from everything else we've seen. We also get another one of those incline lifts. As with so many entrances on the line, the entrance here is directly integrated into a transit-oriented development. More specifically, an over-station development. Heading back to the other side of the station, we get more substantial interchange with Thameslink. Things generally feel cohesive, but this side has a bunch of diamond art, as well as a sloped crossing pattern on the roof that's really cool. Outside, the new entrance stands across from the old one, and these stark lines look excellent. I must say, I also love the planters here and the small touch of the double arrow sign. Now, if you can believe it, another 1.5 kilometers from Farringdon is Tottenham Court Road, which has connections to the Northern Line running north-south and the Central Line running east-west. Tottenham Court Road is perhaps the most interesting to me, because the two platforms here are quite far apart, and the eastbound platform is actually curved. As it turns out, because the Northern Line is quite deep here, the Elizabeth Line tunnels ended up running above it, and the eastbound tunnel needed to be curved to precisely allow it to pass less than a meter under an escalator shaft to the Northern Line and a meter over the Northern Line tunnels itself. Looking at the station, at platform level, besides the curved platform on the north side, which is the only one in the core, things look similar to Whitechapel, Liverpool Street, and Farringdon, with two platform tunnels connected across to a series of wide central tunnels which run between them. Heading towards the surface, we have more transit-oriented developments on the western end, as well as lots of screens all over the place, and cool barrel-style light fixtures that run down to platform level. You also get a sense for the scale of the escalator box with the massive cross braces. The eastern entrance, where you'll want to be to transfer to the tube, also has more oversight TOD, as well as two big glass canopies which remind me of the one at Liverpool Street and let you access the station. Leaving Tottenham Court Road, we pass Bond Street, after about another 1.5 kilometers. The station here will provide north-south transfers to the Jubilee Line and east-west transfers to the Central Line. Now this takes us to our final stop for today, 3.5 kilometers west of Tottenham Court Road at Paddington, which itself is another major rail terminus, providing connections to the Heathrow Express, National Rail, as well as the western services of the Elizabeth Line to Reading and Heathrow via the mainline platforms. Of course, you can also change trains here for the Bakerloo line via a new connector tunnel to head north-south, or to the Hammersmith and City, Circle or District lines to go east-west. Though it's another case where the connections are maybe a bit generous. The Hammersmith and City line is quite a walk to get to. Paddington is quite a large facility with the open box platform design and lighting, which reminds me again of Woolwich. That said, heading up a level, the facility at Paddington is a lot more grand, with a big open space that's hemmed in by very nice brick walls and lots of brown tones, with access at either side. Also quite nicely, this space is open to above, which itself is only covered by a giant canopy, sort of giving it an open air feeling. Paddington, as with the rest of the stations we saw today, is fully step-free accessible, which means that level boarding is available onto the trains. All stations to the west, besides the stations at Heathrow, and everything to the east from Stratford are accessible to the platform, but do not have level boarding. At Paddington, we go upstairs and make a transfer to the western surface section to go back to the hotel, which will be where I sit for the next few hours before you watch this video. Now you're probably wondering if I have a deep list of thoughts, and I do, but they're probably best saved for a video in the next few weeks once I've had time to process. I think the Elizabeth Line surprised me, and then it didn't. The stations and facilities are really large, but they definitely don't have the cathedral-like presence you see in a system like the RER. You also don't even have the giant escalator banks seen at a place like Canary Wharf Jubilee Line Station. I don't even recall seeing a bank of escalators with more than 3. That's likely because the Liz Line is less about dumping people out in one central location and more about creating connections across numerous different entry pavilions and other lines with snaking tunnels all over the place. Of course, given the line's depth, which actually felt less extreme than I expected, there was less potential to do massive open spaces all over the place as well. That's not to say the line isn't modern, mind you. The finishings are artful, and even smaller details like the ticket machines are really nice. The line also innovates in some really interesting places, by really going wild on the consistency from station to station doctrine. You probably noticed that as I pointed out, the white interior cladding and wide open circular tunnels are quite a theme throughout the central core. But what you may not have noticed is how elements that remind me of a modern airport terminal design, where a sweeping roof covers a number of smaller internal buildings that are incorporated into the stations. Namely, help points, security cameras, wayfinding, and even lighting in much of the tunnels are all provided by floor-mounted poles. Similarly, much of the wayfinding, ad screens, and lighting for the platform portions of the stations is all integrated directly into the platform screen doors. I think ultimately coming out of this trip, the best word I can use to sum up the experience of the facilities on the Elizabeth line is otherworldly. It really does feel like something out of a sci-fi movie, especially the gigantic white tube-shaped tunnels and the massive trains snaking underneath London. It also feels like the type of thing that could make a transit skeptic a believer, sort of like riding the subway for the first time. The Elizabeth line is clearly in a class of just a few other transit lines in the world, such as the RERA and the Yamanote line in Tokyo, for the incredibly important role it will play in its city. With its opening, a new era for the most iconic urban transport system in the world begins. Thanks for watching.